disables the compiler-generated default constructor. But we can put it back. We can tell the compiler. We can explicitly say, I want you to generate a default constructor for me by putting this equals default in there. And we can do the opposite. Not to generate the default constructor by saying equals delete.
Sorry, I may have missed something.
Yeah.
Why are you telling the compiler to generate a default constructor? Does it not do that?
It does. In this case, it does. But if we had any other constructor, say we had example int float like was on the previous slide, in that case, that would disable the generation of the default constructor. So this puts it back in. So in this case, we get it anyway. I might just edit the slide in a second and put a second constructor in there that would otherwise disable the generation of the default constructor. This equals delete, by the way. This is not specific to constructors. Absolutely any function can be equals delete. That is a compile error to look at that function to try and call that function. It gives you a whole compile error. So this is quite useful for giving nice error messages. It says, you are doing something that's not allowed. The equals default only works for special member functions, of which the default constructor is one. Right, so this is great because it means that I can stop talking. Yes.
I have another question. We can find default values for arguments.
Yes.
If you do that for all arguments,
It becomes a default constructor, yes.
it becomes
Yes, it does.
So default constructors can have arguments. But
If it can be called with 0 arguments, it qualifies as a default constructor,
Oh.
and you won't get one automatically. Yeah. So I went through that really quickly. So hopefully you were paying enough attention to be able to do this. Otherwise, I can flip back a few slides if you want. Sorry?
Sorry, I was just reading the message in case I'm validating when I try marking the default constructor to delete it.
What does it say?
Mark the default variable. Huh? Is it delete?
Yeah. But now if you run it, run it there.
Playground are we doing this?
You need to create your own code.
So
Make
now,
a class and
you see, it's not default constructor because we've deleted the default constructor. Okay, so when you finish, just sit back, look relaxed, and I can move on. Neil looks relaxed all the time.
It's the drugs.
I do like the free tea and coffee in this place, but and the bar's nice and everything. All good? won't sit there and demonstrate all of this because it will take a bit too much time, but if we declare a constructor which takes an int, so you should see on the empty class, it's default constructible. If we declare our own constructor which takes an int, you should see that we now get a cross next to default constructible. So adding our own constructor disables the default constructor. Right? But now if we put a compiler generated default constructor, so if we write example empty brackets equals default, well, it goes back to the default constructor. Right? This is pretty much just what I just said on the slides. So you're looking confused.
No, I'm not.
Pretty much what I just said on the slides. I just wanted you to see it in action. Right? That's kind of the point of the playground. It's also the least fun playground you've probably ever been on, but never mind. But we can, we wouldn't get it anyway, but we can say, we can explicitly delete it if we want to. And that does the same thing as not defining it at all. So on the last one, we take this new constructor, the one that takes an int. If we mark the new constructor, the one taking int as equals default, what happens?
Get an error? No.
Anybody else? You just race through these things, Neil. I'm going to give everyone else a chance. You sit there smug because you wrote a better CSV parser than me.
No,
Right.
no. It's on GitHub. You can have a look later.
Oh, I should have. Oh, never mind.
That's right.
Too late now. Right. What you should see if you tried this last one, if you tried to mark the constructor taking int as equals default, as Neil says, you'll get an error. Right? The compiler, I think certainly in Clang, the error message is really nice. It just says only special member functions may be defaulted. You can try it now if you like. GCC says
Cannot be defaulted.
yeah. So quite a nice error message, I think, for C++. Usually they're terrible, but that one's pretty good. You're looking confused.
I haven't followed everything, but I think I'll get there.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, but it's perfectly fine.
I was racing a bit because I wanted to get on to actually sort of doing it manually. Trying these things out is a lot better than me just telling you about them, I think. Probably. That's the idea. Okay, so we'll move on. Explicit constructors. Constructor, so we were talking about this, someone asked a question about this last week. Constructor which takes a single argument can be used as an implicit conversion. Right? I'm a bit worried this isn't going to work, but there we are. Right, so this is a function which takes an example. Right, example has a constructor taking an int. Unfortunately, this is going to clear all that. But the crazy thing is we can call that function with just an int. Right? And what's happening is if we call func3, the 3 is being implicitly converted into an example.
But why does it assume that's what you want to do?
Well, that's a very good question. Implicit conversion can be surprising, right? They're usually not what you want, right? That function was declared to take an example, and we've just called it with an int and got no error. I mean that is peculiar. But we can fortunately we can disable these implicit conversions by marking our constructors as explicit. And it's probably a good habit to get into, because I think this is one of the places where C++ has the wrong default. right? I think it should be opt-in, right? So just get in the habit of having all your single argument constructors as explicit, as we have here. Explicit example int, and this will prevent the function. So that will now be a compile error, as you are about to play with for yourself. This ties into what we were saying earlier. The functions constructors can have default arguments, and it means that sometimes it's not obvious when a constructor can take only a single argument, and you can get surprising. This also comes up if you have a constructor that takes variadic template arguments. Sometimes it can act as an explicit. So just look carefully and have some fun. If you look, there's a file called example CPP. It's got some commented lines in. Uncomment them and try and run. I think it requires the default constructor, so you might have to add that back in if you deleted it. So by the way, if you're looking at this thinking, oh, there must be some trick to it, what's happening? These are, there are 5 things there, but they're, except the last one, maybe, they're not tricky. There's no trick to it. Has everyone got test example compiling file? You've opened it, you've had a look, you've commented out, uncommented those lines. Should be 3 lines in there. Yeah.
So what's in the with the last one? So what we supposed to do about the last one?
The last. Right. So. Well, I'm about to say this out, but right. So the first one we call the default constructor.
Yeah.
The second line we pass the e variable into that function.
Yeah.
Which is fine. The last one, we're passing an int into there. Now, if you've
an int obviously doesn't like the int, so could not convert 3.
Have you? So in your example.hpp, have you got? Oh, you've gone back to basics.
Yeah, I mean.
All right. So going on from the last exercise, we added a constructor that had a single int.
Sorry. Okay.
Sorry. So yeah. Sorry, I was building on the last exercise. That was.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else having difficulty sitting there all confused? All right. Thumbs up.
I get an error on the second one.
Right, the constructor's taken it as explicit.
So
What happens? We get an error. That's exactly what is supposed to happen. yeah, not all of the examples will compile, but that's why we started out with those lines commented. In fact, if you comment out the last line in example.cpp, so then you can rerun the playground and it should tell you that it's no longer implicitly constructible.
But you don't even need to pass it in. For example, if you declare the default constructor, if you set that to, as in you want the default constructor, you can throw in anything you want in there. It'll work.
No.
Okay. So if I go to here, so my example, so I'm asking for a default constructor.
Yeah, and you've also got an int constructor, that's fine.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So if I go here, and I go,
Okay.
this will work.
Yeah, well. Why?
Because the default
What's-
constructor.
No. So if we go back to this, what are you passing there?
Character.
Okay. A character is an integer type in C++, so that is converting your char to an int and calling
Okay, let's say if I was to go
double is converting to an int. You're going to have to work really hard to find something that's not. I would say like try a standard function or something. Int. You're going to have to add a vector header as well, just control them or something. Yeah. Okay, so now just pass v in there. Now try and run it. Yeah. So the reason it worked with a char was because that's implicitly convertible to an int. That's why these implicit conversions are bad. That's a really good. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm in an error on Kings. Use explicitly.
Fine. Oh, because if you go back to it, you just have to add an empty pair of brackets after it. You just have to declare the function, not define it. I'm probably the same. So if
So
you
if I do that,
Oh yes, okay. Right, so what it's saying, I think, is that because you made it explicit, I can't call this last one. There's no.
yeah, so if I do that,
Okay, but you still need to define the constructor when you declare it. This one. Oh. We've still got an undefined reference to menu there, which I don't think did you open this in CMake? Oh, sorry, have you used the CMake project? Oh, okay, so you
If I want to clone, the playground, how do I do that? Sorry. If I want to import
so we
the framework, which one? The one with the playground.
so does Genie not have support for CMake? You can try just opening the CMake project.
And you can download this.
So we
for example.
will be
this one.
no, so the CMake is text. Might just just opens it in the text file. I don't know if it has like an open project. So we yeah, sorry. So we been using C-Line as the IDE. So we all, it's one of our early sessions. We all kind of got started just so we all were seeing the same thing, and these things magically work. Because otherwise, we do get a lot of difficulties with make files and stuff if everyone's using their own IDE. Right, so I already told you, you've already seen it, hopefully. You can call function taking example a 3. Right, so what's actually happening when we do that? I've said implicit conversion, but that doesn't really tell you what's going on.
Does it just pass that 3 into the example constructor for you?
Yep. And it creates a temporary example and passes that to the function.
Yeah.
Right, so it's creating this invisible temporary, not invisible, but creating this temporary variable for you. Right. So that was the point of try and work out what's happening. We're getting a temporary variable created. So if we mark it as explicit, what happens? Well, we've already said we get an error. Point of this was just to demonstrate that if we get default arguments, we can still get an implicit conversion through this guy. If we remove the default argument, so we just got that, we now can't get an implicit conversion. But what happens if we do mark it as explicit? Does anyone try that? So we have if we mark a 2-argument constructor as explicit, what do we do?
I'm compiling the first, because for example, if with any change.
Well, this one gave you an error message.
Sorry?
No, as in if you mark it as explicit, then it will give you.
The opposite.
Yeah,
You can
but
mark a
it's not
2-argument
compiling because, for
constructor as
example, the
explicit,
function
and it's no error.
pass into I cannot.
It doesn't do
for
anything,
example.
but it's no error.
No, but he told just to uncomment.
No, that was based on the previous example at the beginning.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
was
so,
an example to do, yes. There was exercise
So
at the
yeah,
beginning.
so go back to see.
Yeah, this is in the
Just-
beginning.
Call out that one.
Half an hour
just
ago.
want to show
Okay.
you
So based on
Marking
the
a
exercise.
2-argument constructor as explicit. It does nothing, but it also is not error.
Okay.
Right. This last one is perhaps this is the most
Yes.
interesting one on this board, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've just,
okay.
Said, oh, these implicit conversions are bad, right? Can anyone think of a situation where they're good, where we would want these implicit conversions?
If you want to be able to construct an object on the fly and pass in the value for its constructor for some reason.
Absolutely. So probably the best example of this is standard string. So string literals in C++, they have they're a pointer type actually. Usually. They're not a standard string. String literal doesn't have type standard string. So standard string has an implicit constructor taking a string pointer argument, and that means that when you have a function taking a string as an argument, you can just pass in a string literal, right? So that's one of the few legitimate uses of these implicit conversions. As you can tell, I'm generally not a fan, but that's one of the good uses.
This example doesn't work.
Yes.
I'm just going to let them whisper for a bit, I think.
Sorry, I'm just cutting
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
I was
just
chilling
shutting
with
out.
this bloody thing, and
Yeah,
I
it's
lost a
fine.
few
Okay.
minutes of class.
You don't want to see me on video anyway.
Your fault.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't mind, Tom, I'm going to shift on. To talk about member initializers. So as I said, constructor job is made the class ready for use. This includes setting the values of its member variables, constructing its member variables. A constructor can have a member initializer list, right, which looks like this. So we have the signature of the constructor, and then we have a colon, and then we say our member variable name is initialized by, in this case, that guy. Our member 2, which you can't see yet because since I do it, it's probably, yeah. So this struct has 2 members. We're initializing the first one from the argument I, and the second one from the argument F. This is something that is kind of unique to C++. You don't have it in Java, in C#, although you have much the same idea about constructors. So I often see people initializing them in the body, right? Don't do that. It's more efficient to do it this way, because if you construct them in the body, what's going to happen is that if you have some complicated type, it's first of all it's going to try and default construct them, and only then is it going to give it the value. So you'll be doing the same thing twice. Right? If you imagine this was a string, this would call the string constructor. Otherwise you're going to default construct the string, then assign to it, and that's a waste of time. So always initialize, well, almost always initialize the things in the member initializer list. Don't initialize your member variables in the body unless you really have to. Now we've seen this. The point class was a reference to many weeks ago now, so I don't blame you if you don't remember that. But we can provide, at the point that we declare our member variables, we can provide a default initialization there. And that way, if we don't provide something in the initializer list, constructor initializer list, it'll use the member initialization, right? One way or the other, you've got to make sure your members are initialized. Otherwise, chaos will ensue. So either initialize them in the default member initializer list or in your constructor initializer list.
I read something that I do not understand about initializers, different assignment, yeah?
Yes.
So that the trick, yes, about initializer is more cheap than assignment again.
Yes, exactly that, yeah. So, I thought I had another slide there, but I didn't. Oh well. So, we're going to have a play with member initializer lists. So we're going to add 2 members. We're going to have an I member, of example, and a D member. They're both going to be initialized to, well, I just pick some values. And then you should have, at this point, have a 2-argument constructor, a default constructor. You can add a single argument constructor back again if you like. The point of this is to just convince yourself about how the member initializer list of a constructor overrides the default initial value that you give it. But if you omit it from the member initializer list, it'll use the default value. I've just explained the whole purpose of this. I'm sorry, you were meant to work that out for yourselves. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. actual school teacher, you guys would be like the best class. You just work in silence.
Try that with toddlers. Change your mind quickly.
Yeah, no one's firing things across the classroom or passing notes. Kids probably don't pass notes anymore, they'll text each other, don't they? Max is laughing because he's like, yeah, that was me on the left.
Remember with guys in my class, you could text without looking at the phone.
Oh, back in the days of multi-touch, you used to,
Yeah,
yeah.
just under the table you just text without.
Nokia 3310. Actually, I had a teacher at school who, not a teacher at school, a teacher I knew, who apparently had a bucket by the door, and when the kids came in, they had to put their mobile in the bucket, and they could pick them up again when they left. Which actually seems like quite a good idea.
They use a lot of them like would use things like iPads and stuff like that in class. So kids rather than using the phone will be using the iPads or the tablets and stuff.
Well, as a teaching aid, yeah, I mean that was probably really good.
Yeah.
Just not for playing Candy Crush. The back of maths. Yeah, when we get our £1 million grant for the C++ London University, we'll get some iPads and we'll sit there and
One side there, the system services. Not like iPads.
They're just Clevos made by a Chinese company. You can get them in the UK from loads of people.
Right. I've pretty much told you what you should expect from this, but hopefully everyone's had a bit of a go and convinced themselves of when it uses the default member initializer and when it uses the value in the member initializer list. I've got copy constructors and copy assignment operators, but I'm not sure we're going to do it in 6 minutes. Which is a bit of a shame because a copy assignment operator is the interesting one. So I'm going to put these notes on, I'll do it in a minute before we leave. I'm going to put these notes online. Writing your own assignment operator is something you have to do rarely, but it's something that's worth knowing how to do properly. So it's another one of these exercises. There are, again, a couple of pages of notes about assignment operators, and then the exercise is to write your own assignment operator. If you don't do the rest of the homework, it'd be really good just to try that, just to make sure you do it, just to see how to do it. You've got to think about what type it returns and how to do that. So it's a really important thing to see to do once. And then I will absolutely drill it into you yet again. Special member functions almost always get generated automatically. You very rarely have to do them yourself. Good to see how to do it, but do it rarely. Right? Prefer the compiler generated versions. And now you've seen how to get the compiler to generate them. Actually, one thing I didn't ask, because we've got 2 minutes, one thing I didn't ask. We get a default constructor if we don't declare any of our own constructors. We get a default constructor. If we do declare our own constructors, we can still request that the compiler generate one for us. Can anyone think of any situation in which we would not be able to, the compiler would not be able to provide us with a default constructor, even if we've asked for one? When might it be an error for the compiler?
If you've got a member that needs a constructor argument.
Perfect. Yes, if you've got a member that is not default constructible, or a base class as well. But we haven't got to them yet. If you've got a member that's not, so the compiler default constructor, all it does is it tries to use the member initializers if you've got them, otherwise it tries to default construct all your member variables. If you can't do that, you won't get a default constructor even if you ask for one. I think if you ask for one and it can't do it, then you get an error, I think. I haven't actually tried it. It's not really relevant for member variables, but it can be important for base classes. So there are situations in which it's just not possible for you to have a default constructor. Right, it is 3 minutes to 9, and they do like us to be quite prompt on the way out. So rather than get a knock on the door telling us all to go, I think that's probably a good place to leave it for today. If you've got any ideas for what you'd like us to cover next time, let me or Tom know. Thank you all for... Yeah, sure. Just wrapping up. What did I say? Thank you all for coming along and bearing with me. I'll, as always, put the notes up. I'll think of some good homework for you, which there is. Please try and write a copy constructor and copy assignment operator, because it is very important. And so see you all next Tuesday again. Tuesday, aren't we?
I think it's Tuesday. I'm trying to get in touch with Cesare to confirm whether our temporary house before we will be back here, if he's back, yeah. If he's not, I'll try to arrange the next week here, if possible. But I will let you know, yes.
It's normally a Tuesday,
we try to be consistent on that, yes. The best day was Wednesday, voted by people who voted, but Wednesday wasn't available here. So the next best day was Tuesday. And that's the reason we booked, yes. So since the class 1, we are every Tuesday. We're on Wednesday because this Tuesday they didn't have anything, but they say we have something else on Wednesday, so we'll take it with an exception. But next week we hope it will be Tuesday, hopefully on our previous place, until we're back here, and then it will be Tuesday. I'm putting on the website, yeah, so go to our cppuni.com, cpplondonuni.com, and you'll find the address, yeah, and just register. If it's for this place, register on the Skills Matter, but if it's on the other place, it's just registered for our on our website. So Tristan and other people know that actually somebody's coming, so they're not, they won't be only with me. Yeah.
Thanks for your help.